My first Zelda game was The Legend of Zelda on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1992. I pretty much didn't finish it until 1995. I didn't know what was going on until 1995. However, after that, well, the rest is history.
I hadn't really played Zelda or fantasy games before.
I had only played Mario games and Yoshi games beforehand.
I didn't actually like it. It seemed too bizarre compared to the games.
I had no idea what he was doing. I had no idea what kind of game you would chase around chickens.
My first Zelda game was actually Link's Awakening for the Game Boy.
The top-down view and him running around a room with blocks and monsters, and I was like, I didn't understand what the point of the game was.
I died a lot. I didn't even think I got the sword.
It was kind of fun just running around.
I was riding Epona, and I was in the Gerudo Fortress, and then I was captured because I didn't know what I was doing.
Obviously, I was attracted to the whole fantasy aspect of it.
But I finally got, this video game fantasy world to play around in.
The Legend of Zelda really clicked with me right away because I could really like the fantasy time period that it takes place in.
Sword and Sorcery, N64, Nintendo.
Most people think of when they think of The Legend of Zelda, the first one from 1986, is it's dangerous to go alone. Take this!
Well, I'd have to say that the most memorable boss, probably the Dodongo. It's not very often you get to shove bombs into a dinosaur's mouth.
Three-headed dragon. Everybody knows it. Easily recognizable.
Third dungeon boss, I believe it's Goma, right? The four-headed crab thing. Freakingly hard to kill. I got lucky once and just killed it in a single bomb, and I was so happy.
It's mostly just being thrust into a world without having any idea what's going on.
You weren't told where to go, you didn't know where the next dungeon is, you didn't even know the order of the dungeons.
So I loved how that game had so many hidden secrets, like finding a random bush and burning it. That really defines Zelda, that ability to just to sort of be curious about something, something that doesn't quite feel right, and then just to sort of explore it, and then you end up stumbling upon something amazing.
What I personally find very interesting about Zelda 2 is the story itself. One thing, it's not called The Legend of Zelda, yet it's the only title in the series that actually addresses the legend.
The most memorable boss would probably have to be Link's Shadow, or Dark Link, as we all know him as.
It was interesting fighting a character who had the same moves that you had, but was better than you at them.
Dark Link basically comes out of nowhere at the very end of the game. You think you're gonna fight Ganon, but no, it's Dark Link.
We're not exactly sure what the nature of Link's Shadow is. We can only imagine that he is, the same entity between each games, and we want answers.
Zelda 2 brought a lot to the table that stuck around. I mean, it had a lot of new elements compared to the first game.
Leveling, I love the side-scrolling. I mean, probably the combat systems what I remember the most.
Link and Zelda hook up more so than they ever have.
My favourite thing about Adventure of Link was probably the 80s style artworks that were associated with it.
It's remained burned in my memory, the scene in Temple where Zelda is lying in the bed in the starting dungeon.
Many people consider that Link to the Past is the best game in the entire series.
Perfect gameplay experience from top to bottom. I only have praise for it, not a single criticism.
The coolest boss in A Link to the Past for me, well, I'd have to say it was the Helmasaur King, which you fought in the Dark Palace.
And Ganon could arguably make the list for most of the games.
I love the Ganon fights, the two fights against him, before the final fight. Partially it's because of the character, he's my favorite character from that game.
It really had a big throwback to the original and how you fought him and how the fight went and all of his new moves.
The best dungeon in A Link to the Past for me was the Skull Woods. It had multiple entrances in multiple hidden places, and it sort of felt as though you could tackle the dungeon sort of out of order.
Beat Agahim and everything, and you think the game's over. I mean, you had already gone through the slew of dungeons. You've already been playing the game for a pretty decent amount of time. All of a sudden, boom! That's not the end of the game.
It was the first game to have the Master Sword in it. Before it had just been a sword.
A favorite moment, that would be the pulling of the Master Sword. Woods light up.
What I like about Link's Awakening, besides the obvious, is that it starts out in the ocean. We jump in the middle of a story that's already happening. We don't know why he's sailing, but...
The best boss in Link's Awakening, I'd have to say, is Moldorm, which is the first boss you fight in the Tail Cave on the Torombo Shores.
Awakening, I remember that I liked the fish boss where you swim in some underground lake.
Is it the Shadow at the end? I forget what it's called. It's like the final boss in the game that shapeshifts into all the different bosses. It was truly unique at the time.
Link and Marin go on a date.
Yeah, going on a date with Marin, that was just really cute.
That the Island of Dream premise, and that whole thing, it adds a surreal kind of feeling to the game and to retain the exploration sense of the original Zelda game. So It's really one of the best games in the series.
Very rare that you play a game that is as in-depth, introduces as many things to Zelda as Link's Awakening does, such as the jump button. That final at the end, it was all a dream, was almost, I mean, it was sad.
It actually happened. It was a real place. Because Link looks up and there's the windfish. So he didn't know imagine it.
My first real Zelda game was Ocarina of Time for the N64.
The first time I played Zelda was with Ocarina of Time.
The first time I actually saw a game and knew that it was a Zelda title was Ocarina of Time, which ended up being my first game.
Ocarina of Time, though, is on the top because that was my first Zelda game.
I got it, you know, in November of '98, like a lot of people.
I had never seen a 3D game before, and I thought it looked real.
I was at my uncle's house. He was adult Link in Kakariko Village, running around and not really doing anything in particular.
It's tricky to say exactly which boss in Ocarina of Time is the most memorable and the best.
Volvagia might be.
You know, when you think Ocarina of Time, you think Goma. I mean, you can think Ganondorf and Ganon at the end too.
But I think when it comes down to it, you just have to say it's Ganon. It's got to be Ganon.
Ganondorf.
Seeing that new version of Ganon, that demonic pig face with those twisting horns and those giant blades that he swings around, is just a really, really, really cool looking boss.
My favorite boss was Bongo Bongo. My most memorable boss, is it Goma?
And I see him go into this dark room, and I'm suddenly not okay, because that was scary, going into the dark like that. And then there's this thing on the wall, I left. I was terrified of Goma.
I can't emphasize enough that my favorite dungeon in the entire Zelda series would have to be the Forest Temple out of Ocarina of Time.
I mean, when I think of Zelda, I think of foresty areas.
Twisting room puzzle, that was really, really cool.
You also get the bow in that dungeon.
It's not even like a forest-related dungeon. You're fighting phantoms, you're fighting Poes, you're fighting Stalfos, you're fighting wolves.
Temple ends with one of the best bosses, I mean Phantom Ganon.
You're always going to remember pulling the Master Sword. Fast forward 7 years.
I literally had to stop playing the game, because I had never played a game that actually had a real story behind it. I had played Mario, but I mean, come on. He was just saving a princess. This was so much more than just saving a princess.
A game in the series that really focused on the instruments and having different songs with different kinds of stuff was unheard of.
Really revolutionary combat. I mean, the Z targeting system, that was original, that was groundbreaking.
Link is by far my favorite Zelda character. He's the main character, he's the main hero. He's a kid and he does all this stuff without ever asking anything in for return.
I liked Navi as well, one of the few ones to me.
I settled on, you know, the Scarecrows, Bonnaroo and Pierre. I always fancied this idea that maybe they were reincarnated forms of the Composer brothers.
Sheik is hands down my favorite character, so I guess that means my favorite character is Zelda.
I definitely enjoy how Sheik is Zelda. I hate it when princesses are absolutely useless.
My favorite Zelda game is Majora's Mask.
Majora's Mask.
Majora's Mask had a really dark and rather confusing story.
It's really kind of an Alice in Wonderland story. You know, that happens to have the moon falling and everyone's gonna die.
The whole twisted Hyrule feel, I love that it took a lot of what we knew about Ocarina of Time and kind of turned it upside down.
Symbolism is just fantastic.
There are too many memories in Majora's Mask.
I love the mask system, I love the dungeons, I love the story and the way the characters' lives kind of intermeshed together.
All the people are connected to the town, and Link has to connect with so many people, so I really like that aspect of the game.
Clocktown and the Bomber's Notebook.
We can forget the side quests.
The Anduin Cafe love quest, listening to the Windmill Man, even just helping that weird hand that sort of comes out of the toilet and wants toilet paper.
I like the ranch quest the best. I mean, aliens.
I've never played another game that lets you interact with so many NPCs on such a large scale, and you became emotionally attached to every single one of them.
My favorite aspect of Majora's Mask has to be Transformation Mask.
One of the most satisfying item systems in the game, or in the whole series. Transformations that give you powers that you might have had in previous Zelda games, like the ability to shoot boomerangs with the Zora mask, but they've kind of meshed those in with new gameplay mechanics, like the Zora's improved swimming.
And there was a nice backstory behind all those transformation masks.
My favorite aspect would be the mask itself. It gives a very surreal feeling. As far as villains go, it's very mysterious.
Just the imagery of the mask and the flames. I mean, you knew this game was going to be darker. And then when it turns out that the mask is actually the bad guy and not the Skull Kid, that was so great.
A lot of Majora's Mask's bosses were really something different.
Favorite boss is either got from Majora's Mask or Star-Lord from Twilight Princess.
Goat is definitely the best boss in the game.
Just because of the nature of the fight, it wasn't really a battle at all. It was more of a drag race or some sort of, chase.
A lot of these games are built around the final encounters in the game, so you have to go with Majora.
The final fight combined with the scene on the moon and everything is just fabulously well arranged.
Stone Tower Temple.
All-time favorite dungeon.
I loved the ambiance of that level.
Just had a lot of unique features.
The entire dungeon turns upside down. Yeah, that happens.
And I loved the soundtrack, probably one of my favorite songs in a Zelda game. Perfect Zelda dungeon for me.
Awesome dungeons and awesome boss fights, and the game's just really, really cool, yeah.
Oracle of Ages is probably the only Zelda game that has done time travel in the sci-fi definition of time travel.
The Mermaid's Cave was really cool because you had to enter the dungeon twice. One time in the present and another time a couple centuries in the past.
Ocarina of Time, you really just want to sleep for 7 years. In Skyward Sword, it's more of affecting pockets of the space-time continuum, so certain areas change their time.
The most memorable aspect of that game was the character Ralph. At the time, I was like, oh my god, Link's got a rival, it's like Pokemon. Another hero in a Zelda game trying to achieve the same thing that you are, but not quite getting there, just because he doesn't love his Pokemon.
Another thing about the Oracle games that's really cool is that you had these representations of the goddesses. I mean, Din, Nehru, and Faroe were all there.
Oracle of Seasons was my first Zelda game. The most memorable moment was dealing with the skeleton pirates. They were sailing in the ocean, and they managed to shipwreck in the desert, somehow plunging themselves through, I don't know, some dimensional void into the world of Subrosia.
Wind Waker.
Well, my favourite Zelda game is probably the Wind Waker.
Oh, who can forget the Wind Waker?
The graphics in Wind Waker. The graphics made that game.
The best thing about Wind Waker is art style. I mean, it's gorgeous.
So cute, so emotional, just perfect animation.
Not only is it visually great, but the music itself is spectacular.
The game was beautiful. The graphic style, the colors, it was just a joy to sail around the boat and do nothing. The music and the seagulls and all that kind of shit.
I love that whole game on its own, just because a lot of it has to do with it being on the sea, and I've pretty much grown up on the ocean.
Link is on a boat. He's never been on a boat before, except, on Link's Awakening.
First playthrough, nothing beats sailing on that ocean the first playthrough. Nothing.
But there's just something about finding an island that you can't really replicate.
And then there's Beetle and he's all like, thank you!
You know Hyrule is under the water the whole time, but you don't think it's preserved down there.
I remember running around screaming, oh my gosh, the Hyrule's under the water!
When it comes to Wind Waker, the best dungeon, I think, is the Forsaken Fortresses, and how different it is, and just refreshing it is to sort of play in a dungeon that doesn't exactly adhere to the rules of ordinary Zelda dungeons. I mean, you don't have the sword, that's one thing.
And one thing, it's open. You can see the sky, you're not really contained by the walls. And you're just trying to stealth around, go in the barrels, it's great.
The fight against Ganon in Wind Waker is probably my favorite boss battle. It just ends with him stabbing him in the face with the Master Sword. That's just absolutely awesome.
The boss fight itself isn't really that huge or that dramatic. However, it's the surrounding story, the tragedy of Ganondorf's character and the ending that really rounded up as the best boss experience.
And with the water coming down and everything collapsing onto the old Hyrule, and then in the end Zelda and Link being encased in air and floating the surface. It's just it's a great ending to a game.
Four Swords was big for me on the Game Boy Advance. It's because it was the first time I really got to play with friends, and I got to throw them into holes and stuff, and that was, even though that's really devious, who doesn't want to do that?
What was great about Four Swords Adventures, and the Minish Cap is they all had a villain that wasn't Ganon. I love that in Skyward Sword we're getting another villain.
Well, it's been a few years since I've played Four Swords Adventures, but again, I'd have to say that the most memorable boss from that game was Ganon. It's the most terrifying sort of representation that we've seen of the original Ganon that we saw on the NES and in A Link to the Past. The sort of way that it took the A Link to the Past style and sort of mixed a GameCube feel onto it and mixed in the Wind Waker. You don't see two-dimensional games on consoles anymore.
There was nothing Minish Cap, I think the backstory. The bosses themselves, I guess if I had to think of one, it would have to be the giant Choo-Choo.
We never expected Link to turn tiny. We never expected that a Choo-Choo could ever be a boss.
He had faced many Choo-Choos before, easily dispelled, and here's one that's just so much bigger than you.
And the whole concept of Minish Cap, I mean, Zelda can do anything. And just think of each game and the concept behind it. It just shows how flexible the series is.
I also really like the Kinstones. You know, they weren't really that exciting from a gameplay perspective, but I liked how you were rewarded, first of all, for exploring and finding the stones in the first place, but second of all, for kind of just talking to every little character and seeing how you can interact with them.
The Minish Cap is definitely, like, in my top 3 Zelda games. I mean, the mole mitts. I mean, yeah, the mole mitts. You get mole mitts. You get to dig. You get to... Mole mitts, man. Mole mitts. I think everyone agrees that the most memorable boss in Twilight Princess was Star-Lord in the Arbiter's Grounds.
The boss from Twilight Princess is Star-Lord.
Everyone's gonna say they like Star-Lord, and you're on the spinner the whole time. It's fast-paced.
Yeah, jumping between the walls, trying to hit it in the face. That's Zelda. I mean, I don't know any other game that would ever have a sort of battle like that. Only Zelda could do that.
It was just a really fun experience, because I really liked the spinner.
Well, my favorite boss is undoubtedly Pyrus from the Goron Mines in Twilight Princess. He is definitely the coolest looking boss I've seen in the entire Zelda series.
Snow Peak Ruins is probably the best temple in the game, mainly because it's a filler temple.
I think the Snow Peak Ruins is at the top for me. It has NPCs in it. I mean, you have to return to Yetis and you have to sort of interact with them. The male Yeti, Yeto, and I just love watching him sort of sit there cooking and making all these weird grunt noises. He's just like...
And then you get the snowboard.
In Twilight Princess, I'll have to go with Ganondorf as well. The 4-part fight, the whole cutscene thing, Midna's transformation and her death.
The Ganon fight at the very end of Twilight Princess though is pretty good because basically combining everything you had ever done against Ganon.
My favorite Zelda character is definitely Midna. She made Twilight Princess, she made it awesome. And she's a refreshing take on the sport character.
To this point, I think Midna was the greatest sidekick that Zelda's ever had. Not just because Midna actually does something at the end of the game, but because you can actually get like an emotional connection to the character.
Her and Link's relationship is the heart of the story, so without that, your story doesn't really exist.
I know a lot of people ended up hating Zan just because of the insane maniac he became. Even though he was such like a menacing sort of badass at the start. But great character development for a Zelda game, something we'd never seen before.
Phantom Hourglass. I wanted to play it because I heard that it was a sequel to Wind Waker, which is definitely a cool idea. And I think that's what attracted a lot of people and what ultimately let people down because they had high hopes for it because of that.
I never finished Phantom Hourglass. I hate that game.
First off, I don't like Phantom Hourglass. I don't hate it. I think it's a good game. I don't think it's a good Zelda game.
Well, in Phantom Hourglass, I'd have to say that my favorite character was Linebeck.
And of course, everybody loves Linebeck.
I thought Linebeck could be brilliantly funny at times. I thought he was well scripted, and that's what I kind of remember most from the game, of something I actually kind of liked.
That guy is awesome. That guy is a badass. Like, I'd totally buy that guy beer if I was in the same bar as him, and I'd probably get into a bar fight with him.
I love Spirit Tracks. It's basically realized all the faults with Phantom Hourglass and just made one of the best designed games.
I honestly loved the Ocean Temple, just because of the way you entered it, which was drove your train on the railway, and the railway went into the ocean, into the dungeon.
The most memorable fight has to be Burn, only because it took me a good, 15 minutes to even figure out how you're supposed to fight him. How am I supposed to pull his hand down?
The final boss in Spirit Tracks was good. I mean, it did everything that we've come to now expect. The final boss, it's a multi-part fight.
3-part fight against Melodus. Refreshingly difficult fight for the series.
The best part of the final boss fight, though, was that Zelda helped deliver the final blow.
My favorite gameplay mechanic was the trains. I love trains. Trains go choo-choo.
Well, the controls in the with Zelda and Link, had to switch around in the Spirit Tower.
The best part about Spirit Tracks is always going to be that Zelda was like your sidekick. She was the sidekick.
You got to sort of see Link and Zelda sort of form a friendship and a companionship that they hadn't really formed before.
But the high-fiving killed me. And then they hug at the end too.
They held hands, they did a little high five, and then yeah, that was it. But it was cute. It was cute.
Ba-ba-ba-da-ba-bum.
Favorite Zelda songs? I'm absolutely the worst person to ask that. I mean, I have like a billion musical things.
My favorite Ocarina song is probably undoubtedly the Serenade of Water, just because it's so well, serene.
My favorite Zelda song is Border of Fire. I can't say that word. Dragon Roost Island, structurally, is also very good.
The Dragon Roost Island theme. The reason it's really catchy. A beautiful song.
It's gotta be Song of Healing. It heals the land, it heals the people.
I love the Song of Healing. I love it because of the way that it was emotionally integrated into the game, and the way the Song of Healing kind of linked all those death plots and death threads together.
I have favorite soundtracks and game soundtracks. I love the Wind Waker soundtrack, and Ocarina of Time always has a special place in my heart.
Favorite song in the entire Zelda series, I'd have to say, is probably the Dark World song out of Link to the Past.
The Dark World theme from A Link to the Past, that's another great one.
I'd really love to hear that song again on an orchestrated scale.
I can honestly say I would not be half the musician I am today if it wasn't for The Legend of Zelda.
Why do I love Zelda? Well, let me count the ways.
Why would I not love Zelda?
There's so many reasons to love Zelda.
Exploration, puzzles, combat, story, fun.
I will be the first one to admit that there's a huge amount of nostalgia involved. It was one of the first game series I've ever played, and it remained with me through my childhood. I wouldn't be who I am today without it.
I don't think there's any other game which focuses so much on exploration, so much on adventure.
How it's got that fantasy feel, you have that sense of adventure and being a hero.
Music, fantasy, fighting, all that jazz.
Because of Zelda, I'm a musician, I'm an archer, I fight, I'm studying how to design video games.
Find an item and figure out its many uses, figure out how to use that tool in different ways and in different scenarios.
It's a series I can play over and over again and never get tired of.
Objectively, there really are no games that can match up to its quality. I mean, people can criticize Nintendo for everything they want, lack of originality, repetitive gameplay, and most of it holds water, but no one does it as good as they do.
Ultimately, though, I'm attracted by the stories and the people and the characters.
I think that whole feel of, being a kid, exploring that fantasy garden that Miyamoto talked about when he talked about the theme behind the first game. I mean, I think that whole feel of being able to dive into this world and do as you please and interact with things and fight enemies with your sword and shield. I mean, that is why I love Zelda and why I think it's so popular and what I think is really essential about all the games.
Why is Zelda so popular?
Well, it's Nintendo. It's as simple as that.
Nintendo had basically no competition because of the video game crash in America. I mean, all the competition was gone. So they had the market up until Sony came into the picture.
I mean, in '86 it kind of made sense, because a lot of games that came out weren't very good, and here was a game that was actually playable.
But Nintendo had tons of games like this. Zelda wasn't the only one, and it wasn't the only one making multiple games. I mean, Metroid is not as popular as Zelda. So what makes Zelda stand out is that it's different all the time. There are so many different types of games. While they all still remain very Zelda, they all do very different things. And in each game, there are so many different aspects that odds are they're going to appeal to you.
In one game you're in a sailing boat, in another game you're on a train. In one game you're on horseback, in the other game you're trying to, save a town from ultimate destruction.
And every time a Zelda game's made, it's basically the game that system that it runs on was made for.
I think that's ultimately what's made it popular, is every time it has a new innovation, it's always kind of the first one to do it. Look at Skyward Sword.
It manages to just succeed so highly with each installment.
The feeling you get when you first open that package and you first put in the game and you hear the opening sequence. It always just kind of captures you.
What am I looking forward to most with Skyward Sword? Well, I mean, we've talked about how there's a lot of content, and we've talked about the art style and how it's really the pinnacle of what the Wii can do. But what I'm most excited about, definitely Wii Motion Plus. You still have that same swinging the sword and fighting enemies and blocking their attacks with your shield, now so much better than ever and so much more involved that I don't think I could ever go back. And I know we've heard that from the development team too, but it's true.
But I don't exactly have any expectations for the game, because I don't want to go into the game with any expectations, because I feel like if the game lets me down, then that will be a bit disappointing. But I know it won't let me down, because I've seen all the videos and stuff and it looks really quite good.
As a longtime fan, I'm obviously looking forward most to it trying to explain certain different aspects of the timeline.
The story, seeing what happens in the Zelda game that comes before Ocarina of Time.
I'm looking forward to the story most in Skyward Sword, let's face it. And when I say the story, I mean Link and Zelda's relationship.
The weapon customization, the storyline with Zelda, the harp. I was so excited to see a new instrument coming in the series, especially Sheik's harp from Ocarina of Time. I'm just like, oh, I want a lyre now. I need a lyre. Just get one. We can have Erica's lyre experience.
The essentials to every Zelda game, you gotta have puzzles.
Dungeons. You know, people keep talking about how they want more seamless dungeon transitions, but you know, clear-cut dungeons, here's the challenge.
Learning something. Zelda is about sort of learning something about your own world. It's about sort of appreciating your own world.
The sword, the shield, the bow, and an instrument. I have a sword, the shield, over there. I have a bow, and I have the instruments. And I do have my cat named Link, so I guess I could have Legend of Zelda right here in my house. This is Link, by the way.
I don't really think it has to have the Master Sword, the Triforce, Ganondorf, or even Zelda in it. There's a lot of things I want. I want it to be difficult. I want there to be, you know, like a 20-layer dungeon. And essentially, it just has to have Link. It has to have real-time combat. It has to be in a fantasy setting. And it has to be fun.
You essentially need to be an underdog who is facing this fantastical, enormous opposition. Saving the world, that's what it is.
What do I see for Zelda's future?
It would be a ballsy move from Nintendo to give the next Zelda game to a third party, but I believe the series would benefit from that immensely, if done right. What I'm seeing is most likely a Twilight Princess-like game on the Wii U.
It's too hard to see where Zelda is going to go because Nintendo they keep surprising me.
It's just really hard to determine what the next Zelda game will be, because it could really be anything.
I mean, I want it to be Majora's Mask 3D. That's what I hope in the future.
So obviously we're gonna get a 3DS Zelda next, a brand new one. We're gonna get Majora's Mask 3D. And then there's the Wii U game.
The next game is likely to be out for the 3DS, and so it's not going to have motion controls.
I don't know what they're gonna do now that they've got Wii U coming, and without that level of motion control in the 3DS, I mean, I don't know, it seems like a step back now. And while they're still gonna be great games, I'm sure, I mean, that philosophy of using the sword and shield seems like it's the pinnacle of what Zelda was trying to achieve in the first place.
I haven't played Skyward Sword, so I don't even know what they have in store for this game. They're calling it the best Zelda game ever. Until I play that, I can't really tell what could happen later on.
I can expect more surprises, I can expect more quality games, I can expect difference, I can expect, you know, that Zelda flavor, that Zelda flair.
I'm interested to see where they go in the depth, because they put a lot of stuff in the Skyward Sword. So if they, on the Wii U, 25GB discs.
As for the future, I think we're going to see a lot more content-based games, especially since with what the Wii U hardware offers is very different than what the Wii hardware offers, and if they really want to go in that direction, I think we're going to see a lot bigger focus on the game content itself, even more than what we saw with Skyward Sword. As long as the content's there and the content's good and it's fun, I think Zelda's got a bright future.